Now I got my hand in my. Oh, hello. What's up, everybody? This is Pete, and this is the Lasser Cast, where me and my good friend over there, Dr. Zayas God, talk about horror movies and streaming shows from all the different decades. We are hopping in our time machine, and we are going back to the time of 2015, which isn't that long ago. It's on 2016. It's only 8 years ago.
Feels
But
like it was 25 years ago.
exactly, dude. Like 2 weeks ago feels like it was 25 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So, even though our worlds might seem a little schizophrenic, it's time to talk about this movie. So Shyamalan, he's actually directed 16 movies, and I didn't even realize that. Like we had talked about, there was this one movie that he made with like Rosie O'Donnell, and I thought that was the first movie he had ever made, but there was actually an independent film he made called Praying with Anger. Have you ever heard of that?
I know that he had like two small movies before Sixth Sense that like nobody had really heard of. And I had not seen either of those, and I still haven't. I've seen of the movies he's made after from the Sixth Sense on. I think I've seen everything but After Earth and The Last Airbender.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, you're probably lucky for skipping those.
Yeah. But like, we started this Shyamalan month. We covered The Watchers, which was his daughter's movie, and then we talked about Unbreakable, and we were like, it's crazy to think what an event his movies were for that little window of like 1999 to 2004.
Yep.
He had like a 5-year window where he was an event director. The way that like people, Christopher Nolan is at a point where he can make anything and it's going to get $400 to $700 million just based on his name value.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer is a 3-hour movie about a physicist, and it made, I think, close to $1 billion.
Yeah.
And won the Oscar. And had that been directed by somebody else, it's probably still getting rave reviews, but it's probably not getting the box office appeal. And very few directors have that, where they themselves become the box office.
Yes.
Shyamalan had that for about 5 years, and then he worked very hard to shit that bed.
Yeah.
And I think we talked a little bit about that with The Village when we covered The Village, about how he like basically ran the Shyamalan formula into the ground. And then he followed that up with like bomb after bomb after bomb. And then we covered The Visit, which was like a nice little return to form, very low budget, self-financed little horror movie using like found footage style. And Split was the movie that really kind of made him a mainstream name again.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't have a twist ending. It has kind of a twist stinger at the end.
Yes.
That sets up the rest of this universe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that, like, as you said, he was working very hard to shit the bed. I think for Shyamalan, I think that like his formula he was taking to like have diarrhea in his bed is basically like ridiculous, goofy dialogue, and then like goofy concepts that are often intertwined with these twists that he has. And Split, like you said, doesn't really have a twist. It's I thought it was a really great return to form. And I rank this movie very high on my list of Shyamalan movies. I've only seen 8 out of his 16 films. So like the 14 films that he's made that like everybody knows about, I've only seen 8 of them. So I've seen like, a little more than half. But do you have yours like written down? You want to rank these films before we start talking about Split?
Oh, we're gonna do the ranking first.
Let's fucking do it. Yeah, let's
All right.
flip the
Well,
script.
then you go first because I was not rank prepared.
Okay. Here we go. All right. So for me, yeah, I was gonna go from last to first. So for 8 for me is 2008's The Happening, which I think that okay, let's just talk about The Happening for 1 second. The trailer, the very first trailer makes it seem like it's going to be like a really disturbing movie and it's going to be far more violent and gruesome than his normal films. And there are some moments in The Happening that are disturbing and like unsettling, especially this one part with like John Leguizamo when he kills himself. That always kind of sticks in my mind.
Yeah.
But the movie is, like I said before, like laced with goofy dialogue, and the concept of The Happening is maybe the silliest concept out of all of Shyamalan's films. Um, let's see. Okay, I can go through the rest of mine. Then you can kind of give me your thoughts on each of them. Old, I think Old is pretty goofy as well. I keep using the same word. It's just it's like you can't take these movies seriously, and so a lot of it is just the dialogue, and I think that Old like smacks you in the face with bad dialogue right away. There's like a little boy in the beginning of the movie. He's that he grows up to be the kid from like Hereditary, that one boy, but like right away he goes up to like people in this hotel and he's like, what is your chosen profession? He just like says stuff. It's like there's no fucking kid on earth that would say that, you know. So that's 7. 6 is gonna be The Visit. The Visit's fun, but I would put everything else before it. I know that you're not a fan of The Village, but I would rank Village as number 5 for me. Signs is number 4. Then 3 would be the movie you're talking about today. My final 2 are Unbreakable and then Sixth Sense. So I'm guessing that your list might be kind of similar to mine.
So okay, so I've seen 10 of his movies. I think 1, 2, 3. I've seen 10 of his movies. Um, so my ranking might be at the top. I'm very similar because having rewatched some of these movies and having thought about a lot of these movies, I think that he really, and I like Shyamalan, and I really do. I like that he, he's become like a name. Like when you say, M. Night Shyamalan, you know exactly what you're kind of walking into, and I like that that he is that. But having rewatched a lot of these movies lately, I really think he's a classic case of a guy who made his best work at the beginning and has he's been fighting to get back to the middle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Okay, so my number 10, and this is going to, and this has nothing to do with the quality of the filmmaking because we talked about it.
Yeah.
There are scenes in this movie that I really enjoy. There are there's acting in the movie that I really like. But I hate The Village so much.
Whoa.
I hate because The Happening, which is my number 9, The Happening can be watched for fun. You can put The Happening on in a room full of friends, pass the drinks around, pass some edibles around, and you can have a fucking blast. Quoting insanely ridiculous lines of dialogue. The Happening is one of those movies where it's like it's so obviously bad, but are you trying to murder me in my sleep? No, it's like it's fun. It could be turned into a fun viewing experience. I gave The Village another shot when we reviewed it, And I was shocked at how angry it made me again 20 years after seeing it the first time. Like I couldn't believe, and you remember our review, I was like getting frustrated talking about it.
Yeah.
Like it also, to me, I put it all the way at the bottom because that to me is the symbolic moment of his decline.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Because I think I'm not alone in this when you look at his filmography. He follows that movie up with Lady in the Water, The Happening, Last Airbender, and After Earth.
Yeah.
And to the point where 4 movies after The Village, he is
Yeah.
desperate to self-finance a little found footage movie.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I cannot put The Village anywhere but the bottom of my list. Then I go The Happening because it's awful, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Then I put Old.
Yeah.
And I don't even really know what to say about Old. I remember watching it and the movie ended and it just ended. And I just went, yeah, okay. All right. Like, I don't even know.
Right.
Uh,
Had a similar feeling. Yeah.
then I'm going to put Glass. And Glass I put a little bit lower.
Oh.
I put Glass a little bit lower on my list because, and rewatching Split, which we'll talk about in a minute, I remember having really high expectations for Glass.
Right.
They
Agreed.
set Glass up to be a superhero movie.
Yes.
And then the twist is, haha, we're not going to do a superhero movie. We're going to do 2 hours of sit down dialogue with these characters. And I remember thinking, what? Why is this movie?
Mm-hmm.
And the movie, and again, the movie ended, and I just went, why? Like, why wasn't this 2 hours of David Dunn fighting the Horde?
Right.
And
Right.
with Mr. Glass, in his wheelchair, turning knobs and like pulling strings.
Right. Turning
It
knobs.
baffled me as a movie, and I ended up putting it very low. Lady in the Water is next, and I have nothing to say about this movie. I remember walking out of the movie theater and going, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I literally have not watched it in the last 20 years. So I just stuck it in the middle of my list because I have that little to say about it.
Yeah.
Then we have, I guess you could call it the top of the list or the mid to top of the list, The Visit, which I remember really liking, but upon rewatch, not liking as much because I think the whole movie hinges on you being surprised that the old people are not the grandparents. When you know that, all of a sudden you start noticing all the other kind of nonsense.
Right.
Then I put Split, which I like, but I also had a lot more problems with it rewatching it this time than I did back in 2016.
Okay, that's interesting.
And then really it's the top 3. It's in order: Signs, Unbreakable, Sixth Sense. The guy started off, he made an Oscar nominated one of the best horror films, and I'll hold it up, one of the best ghost movies ever made, one of the best horror movies of the last 25 to 30 years in The Sixth Sense. He followed that up with the super awesome Unbreakable that we both loved, and we started talking. That was our first M. Night movie that we talked about.
Right.
And then he followed that up with Signs, which was a pretty good little alien movie. And it's really nothing more than that. It talks about faith. And if I rewatched it now, being as agnostic and kind of atheistic as I am, I'd probably slam it for being too over the top with the faith stuff. But I remember really enjoying Signs. The production design, the marketing with all the crop circles. I thought was great. And I thought, it held up, as a just a good little kind of throwback to the 50s and 60s Alien movie. So those are 3, 2, 1: Signs, Unbreakable, and The Sixth Sense. I don't think anything will ever top The Sixth Sense for me that he's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up that point that essentially like his best movie is his first movie. And it
Or
kind of is
the movie that made him famous.
right. Very good point. It's like these first two movies, Praying with Anger, whatever the hell that movie is. But Signs, I think, actually is legitimately scary too. You watch Signs. That scene when the alien walks out during that party, that birthday party in Mexico or whatever. Oh man, I still think about that scene. That scene where the alien's like reflected in the TV screen at the very end of the movie too.
Yeah.
Legitimately awesome movie. Then he has this wilderness period between 2004 and 2015 that you already talked about, which started with The Village. And I guess you really fucking hate The Village because that's your last one. But then, some people liked it. I think The Village actually did well. It didn't do as good as these other movies that we talked about.
The Village is one of those movies
yeah.
that I sometimes see on social media, that a lot of people decide that their crusade on social media is reclaiming movies that they feel were unfairly maligned.
Yeah.
And I'll admit there are movies like that one of the first things that I ever wrote for Geeks of Doom was, and I still love it, I still look at it sometimes, was an open letter of apology to Halloween 3.
Right.
Because I was one of those kids who grew up in the late 80s, went to the video store, was like, oh my God, Michael Myers just blew up in the hospital in Halloween 2. What the hell are they going to do in Halloween 3? And then the movie ended and I went, what the fuck was that? He wasn't in the movie. This isn't a Halloween movie. I hate this movie. It's the worst. And then, decades went by. I finally said, I'll give it a rewatch. And I went, oh, being able to use the internet to watch interviews with John Carpenter and see that he had intended it to be the beginning of an anthology series and it was supposed to be a spin-off, and you have Tom Atkins and all these other really great actors in it, and the score is great. I love a Halloween 3 now. So there are some horror movies that you can reclaim.
Yes.
And I've seen people are like, I'm sick of people saying The Village isn't great. And I will forever just look at them and go, no, you're wrong. It's not great. It never was. And listen, the bottom line is, if The Village was great in 2004, there would be a much higher appreciation of M. Night Shyamalan, the filmmaker, today.
Yes.
Yes, people are excited for Trap. Yes, people were excited for Split and Glass. But then to make Glass, to make Old, a lot of people, especially in the horror community, they hear the name M. Night Shyamalan, and that could very easily be as much of a turnoff for them as it is, ooh, I can't wait.
Right.
And that all started with The Village. And
right.
That is what I will hold my head on, that The Village is the bottom of the barrel with him, because it's the movie that started the complete downfall of him, to the point where he needed to be rebuilt and build himself back up to make the movie that, almost 20 minutes in, we're going to start talking about.
Hey, I'll take that torch from you right now. Pass the baton. Here we go. So, like with Split, it's funny because like with Friday, not Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, a lot of times they talk about Dimension Films and they say that was the house that Freddy built.
New Line. It's okay. Don't worry.
It's
Line,
early.
But yes, it's the house that Freddy built, the New Line Cinema. Dimension was the offshoot of Miramax that started releasing horror movies in the mid 90s.
Okay. Yes, like Scream, right? Scream's in that one. And
yes.
and okay. Anyway, so New Line is the house that Freddy built, but then I almost feel like Blumhouse could be the house that Split built, right? Because this movie is the highest grossing Blumhouse film up until Five Nights at Freddy's comes out, and that's pretty recent too. So it made $278 million on a budget of $9 million. And one thing that I didn't know was that this is the same thing as The Visit, where Shyamalan financed this himself again. So, once again, he takes his own money, he puts it in, he makes a movie, and he just makes a shit ton of money for the studio, for
Yeah.
Blumhouse. So I'm sure that like he was like a big influence on the success of this company. So this movie, I think the main reason why, and you've already kind of touched upon this, the main reason why this movie was a big hit is because there's this ending, this stinger ending, which tied in with the movies of the time. This movie came out in 2016, so this is kind of like right in the middle of comic book movie, like
Isn't that
mania.
Captain America Civil War 2016?
That sounds about right. A really fucking good year then if it's got Civil War in it. There's a whole bunch of great MCU movies at that time. DC's kind of trying at that point. And here comes Shyamalan with his, guess what? I made a shared universe. You didn't realize it. So
And it's a
this
shared superhero universe.
yes, and it's pretty shitty. So anyway, so with this one, I mean the first two are good. The first one's really good. Second one's pretty good, and then the third one, from what I've heard, I haven't seen, is pretty bad. So
disappointing, I think, is the word I would use. Incredibly disappointing.
Yes. But it's funny when you watch Split, which we're gonna now actually talk about the movie 21 minutes in, like you said. There's so much dialogue in this movie that does suggest superheroes. Like you sit there and you're kind of like, tense and stuff because you're thinking about Anya Taylor-Joy and her two friends being kidnapped and James McAvoy's amazing performance. You're engrossed in that, but there's this side plot where his therapist or psychologist, she's constantly saying things that you would hear in a trailer for Superman movie or superhero movies.
Yeah, and that was something that kind of gave me pause upon rewatching it. Was this idea that like DID, dissociative identity disorder, or multiple personalities, the idea that which is a real mental illness,
yes,
is the idea that like they were like, let's use that in the script and let's make mental illness a gateway for superpowers.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that just a couple years later, that would have been really chewed up and spit out a little bit more in the media discussing this movie.
Yes.
Betty Buckley, I believe, is the actress who plays the doctor, the psychologist. And it seems weird. Like I don't know. I don't know anybody with DID, or I've only really heard about DID from watching movies, split personality type characters. Yeah. But it feels like somebody who has that level of mental illness who's under doctor's care, would not be allowed to live on their own.
Yes.
And the fact that like she's like, oh, one of Kevin Crumb's personalities just emailed me, I have to take this meeting. And it just doesn't feel at all. And again, this is part of the problem with Shyamalan, where when you rewatch his movies, all of these little bugaboos and questions and nitpicks are so much louder, because on first viewing, you're sitting there and you're going, all right, I got to pay really close attention because I want to try to figure out, is there going to be a twist? What's it going to be? But when you know the ending and when you know what's happening, then you can focus on the stuff that you may have missed, or you might not have been completely focused on.
Right.
And so like that aspect of it, the fact that Kevin Crumb, who I think we mentioned this back when we covered Unbreakable, Shyamalan has said that when David Dunn, Bruce Willis, bumps into the mom with the little kid at the football game, before he interrogates M. Night Shyamalan for being a drug user, that mom with the little kid is Kevin Michael Crumb. And that's his abusive mom. And that's what David Dunn felt when he bumped into the mother, was the child abuse.
Right.
It just feels like somebody like him would not be able to have a therapist and who knows that he has 23 personalities inside of him, and is perfectly fine with him living on his own. And obviously he doesn't have a home because he's living like in the tunnels and the dressing rooms under the zoo, as we find out at the end, which I also think, which again, I thought was clever and I liked upon first viewing. But then you watch it again and you're like, wait, how? What?
Yeah.
How was he there the whole time? Like, this guy just randomly walks in at the end and finds Anya Taylor-Joy in a cage.
Right.
So, like, there have to be more than one person who works at the zoo who has a locker there. There's like 15 lockers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of holes in this movie. I think one of the things that they do say kind of early on in the movie, because when he's that Hedwig, that little boy, he says that, like, you know, he worked really hard to make sure the place was safe for you guys. He worked for months to make sure the place was safe. So there must have been some kind of like soundproofing and stuff they put in there. You know, they cut through the walls at one point. They find like they're inside of a cage. So I think that like maybe they made it to where they wouldn't be discovered in that space. But I mean, I don't want to try to like make excuses for this movie. It's funny because one of the points that you made before that I really liked was how, like, if this movie was made later, people wouldn't approve of this idea of like mental illness giving people superpowers, right? And I think that like this is one of the situations where the people on Twitter and stuff, this movie got by, and the Bruce Willis part at the end, it just kind of like made them overlook this movie or overlook this point. But then they were like, okay, the next one we'll get the next one. And then all of a sudden the movie The Predator comes out and they're like, wait a minute, an autistic kid can think like the Predators. Let's get that one. You know?
Yeah. I mean, a movie that we both loved, When Evil Lurks, or where Evil Lurks?
Isn't it When Evil Lurks?
Yes. That movie, which was my favorite horror movie of, I believe it was 2020. That was last year, 2023. That was my number one. I think it was your number two.
It was,
that movie has an autistic child in it. And I saw a lot of discourse online from people who complained that it was a terrible portrayal of autism, that they hated the movie because of that one character. And that's fair. Like, I don't think that that's out of line to, like, if you have a personal attachment to, you know, like, I'll give you a completely separate example. Like, Athena and I just started watching The Bear, and I read one review that was like, I live in Chicago. That show is so obviously trying to make you, it's like trying to be Chicago, but it's obvious they don't know anything about it. And I'm like, well, I live in New York, and as a New Yorker, that show feels like Chicago as a character. So it doesn't bother me. But if like they did a show in New York and, you know, there were like over stereotyped portrayals of New Yorkers, that shit would bug me right away.
Yes.
Did you ever hear of a show called Vice Principals on HBO Max?
Yeah. I heard of it. I haven't seen it, but yeah. So
like Athena and I watched one episode of it because she had got it recommended. And like halfway through the first episode, I was like, yeah, I'm fucking done with this show. And she's like, why? And I'm like, because it's about education, and it's obvious that nobody even spoke to a teacher or spoke to an educator. And it just makes everything about education feel stupid. And that annoys me as a viewer, and I don't want to watch that.
Yeah.
Whereas like a show like Abbott Elementary, I love, because I feel like that show feels like it was written, even though it probably wasn't, it was written by or like with teachers in mind and with education in mind. And it makes me like kind of, I don't want to say proud, but it makes me like proud of my profession while I watch Abbott Elementary, like watching what the teachers are going through and dealing with the students. And I'm very, so I get where people can be sensitive to things about like, something more serious than what your job is or what city you live in, like mental illness. You
Yeah.
know, one thing that I will say about these movies that we're talking about is where you can quibble about Shyamalan's dialogue, his writing, or, some of the, plot holes. He gets some genuinely great performances in his movies. Uh, Brad Pitt, Bruce Willis carries, is very much responsible for him, his career taking off with Sixth Sense and Unbreakable.
Yeah.
Those movies were carried by really great Bruce Willis performances. Um, The Village, a movie that I obviously do not like, had a great Joaquin Phoenix performance. And really, most of the performances are good in the movie.
Yes.
Even though in that movie you have Adrian Brody doing a very kind of over the top portrayal of mental illness as well.
Right.
This movie, and I think you already kind of hinted at it, and it's down there at the bottom. This movie is James fucking McAvoy's movie, and you're able to overlook these nitpick stuff, all these things that we're like complaining about and nitpicking about when you just sit down to watch it because of how engaging James McAvoy is, literally playing 5, 6, 7 different characters. I think we only really meet and get a good taste of about 5 or 6 of them. There's Barry, who's the painter. There's Dennis, who's the one who kidnaps them at the beginning. There's Patricia, the the woman, the adult woman who's very like domineering. Then there's of course Hedwig, the child, which he's like almost adorable at, but weird.
Yes.
And then of course he, the beast at the end. And I'm sure there's the other characters that he plays.
Yeah.
Obviously there's Kevin, but he is so good. And another horror movie that we both loved, Speak No Evil, he is going to be the lead antagonist in that.
Right.
And I'm like super excited. I think it's him, and I think his wife is played by Alicia Vikander.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh shit, like that's gonna be fucking awesome.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. This movie is the movie that put him on the map. I mean, he was in other things and he already was a bit of a star by the time this movie came out. But this movie made it like it really blew him up a lot. And it's funny because
when did the X-Men movies come out?
The first class one that he's in, that's before 2016. So he's in that first, then he's in this. Like this is his like, star grabbing role. And it's funny because like you mentioned Dennis, he's one of the main alters that we see in there, and Dennis himself has a condition as well. Dennis has OCD. So it's like, they're showing people with OCD too, and they're like, I'm sure people with OCD.
And he also, again, this is from the psychiatrist, from Betty Buckley's character, he also likes to take pictures of young girls.
Yes, yes.
So again, the psychologist knows this, that you have one of these alter egos is a pedophile, essentially.
Yeah.
And she is totally fine with him walking in and out of the office and not being in some kind of an institution. Again,
yeah.
Like, great performance by James McAvoy, but what the hell are they thinking in the rest of this movie?
Yes. So, you mentioned how there's only a few alters that really get in the spotlight here. And they even called it the light, where they're like, when a personality takes over, then they're in the light. Now, I don't know. I would actually really love to get a behind the scenes, like a director's commentary on this movie, see what's going on. But I wonder if Shyamalan was at all influenced by a character from the Doom Patrol, which is like a comic book that they made into a TV series that Brian and I have covered a lot on Comic Books Transformed. There's a character who is called Crazy Jane in the comics in the 90s, or late 80s. But now they just call her Jane on the show, right, on HBO Max. But Jane is very similar to the Horde in this movie. And the actress that plays Jane on that show is really great. I can't remember her name off the top of my fucking head. I'll look it up in a minute. But it's essentially the same kind of concept where her mental illness gives her superpowers. And also, she was abused as a child, which made her have all these different personalities. With Jane, every different personality has a different superpower. So when she becomes one of these other personalities, she has like a different power. So I was wondering if like Shyamalan was influenced by the Doom Patrol comic at all when he made this story. Now,
it sounds like a really good writer's trick for a comic book writer, where it's like, I don't know what kind of superhero power I want my hero to have. I'll write a way where they can have every power.
There you go. Yes.
Oh, now I'm a different person. I'm Spider-Man now.
right. In their defense, with Jane, like the powers are all really weird. So it's not just like, oh, now she's got super strength. There's really weird things. But I love the Doom Patrol. I actually really like this movie. And another person that really likes this movie is my mom. My mom could like watch Split at the drop of a hat. I actually watched Split at her apartment while she was at work. And then when she found out I watched Split, she was all like disappointed. She's like, oh, you watched Split? I would have watched Split. But one thing I wanted to point out, I can kind of tie this all together. Watch this. I'll do this. Is that this movie starts with awkward dialogue immediately. There's like a party for this girl. Like she's at the mall for her birthday, and she's brought a bunch of friends to the mall for her party. They're like in the food court eating. And all the friends get picked up except one girl is left. And so this girl's father turns to the girl and he says some kind of line. I think his first line is like, I believed that all of your friends would have been picked up at this point. He like says the most awkward thing, like, I believed. And it's like, nobody fucking talks like that. That's one of the things I hate about Shyamalan is like, he just makes the characters talk in a way that people would not talk. And it's very jarring to me. But when it comes to the main characters like Anya Taylor-Joy and then James McAvoy, really the only time that their dialogue is awkward is with Hedwig. Otherwise, I think that the rest of their dialogue is fine. But Hedwig has a couple of moments where he'll say something very serious, but then he'll say something really stupid, like, I got a Bluetooth brush, you know, or like he'll just say some random thing. And I realized that when I was watching.
He's supposed to be 8 years old, right?
Yeah. And they say,
so I guess that's.
Go ahead. Well, I said, like, I work with 8-year-old kids a lot. You know, I work in education too. And they say random shit, but they don't say it the way that Shyamalan shows it. It's not like they say something, then they say a random thing. It's like you have to kind of prompt them to get it out. He's like, you know, he says something real dark, like, the beast is coming for you. And then he's like, I like to eat Pop-Tarts. Like, the kids don't fucking talk like that, you know? And so these are just minor nitpicks, but they're just very jarring when they happen in the movie. And I think he's doing such a fantastic fucking performance. Like, when he is Hedwig at first, he like walks where it's like his knees are touching the top of his feet. So he looks like a little gnome man as he walks up to them, you know, and he does such a good job with his inflections and the way that his face changes whenever he's one of these different characters. And he can like switch on a dime too, where he'll be like Dennis, but then he'll be Hedwig, you know, and it's amazing. So, I mean, he plays 23 different characters. They're known as the Horde, and that's like their supervillain name. And then, I'm sorry. The Horde is just the main alters. And then there's this extra personality called the Beast. But before we get into all that shit about the Horde and stuff, we should talk about a fucking movie star who, man, is she not one of the biggest names in horror right now?
She's one of the biggest names in like movies right now. I mean, she was Furiosa.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You Anya Taylor-Joy is like going to be one of those people that like we look back on probably 20, 30 years from now as like a Jamie Lee Curtis, Johnny Depp, Kevin Bacon, where it's like, oh, that first movie we know them from, Halloween, you know, Jamie Lee Curtis, the Scream Queen, who went from being a Scream Queen to more risque work in the 80s, to, you know, even like going into action and drama and comedy and really stretching out her legs as an actress to the point where she's now an Academy Award winner, who never has, you know, who never leaves the horror genre behind. You have, you know, Johnny Depp, who, of course, you know, his first, I think, film role is Nightmare on Elm Street, and he went on to be one of the biggest stars in the world. And, you know, ATJ from The Witch to this, she's obviously, she comes back as this character again in Glass. She's in this this kind of low budget little it's definitely a horror movie. I saw it. Anton Yelchin was in it, and it's her. It's her and another girl, and they're like, you know, almost like budding serial killers. I think it's called Thoroughbreds.
Oh, I actually fucking love Thoroughbreds. Yes, yes, yes.
So she has built herself up. She takes these incredible roles. And again, not to be creepy and weird, but she's just so striking. Like nobody else in the world looks like her. She's got like these amazingly big eyes that just pop on screen. The Menu, oh my God, like her performance in The Menu is fucking amazing. You know, her eating, you know, iconically eating a cheeseburger at the end of that movie, while everything else is burning. Yeah, she's really become horror royalty. And, you know, I know Furiosa was considered a bust, but still, you know, she is like mainstream. And let's not forget the best movie she was in, also kind of horror, The New Mutants.
Oh, ay. She plays one of my favorite characters.
I will defend The New Mutants because for one whole calendar year, that was the only movie I saw in the movie theater.
Wow, that's fucking impressive.
There was like during the pandemic, a movie theater in Long Island did like a soft reopen, and Athena was like, "Why don't we just go? They're only playing like this and one other movie. It's a comic book movie. Let's just go." So like we went with Charlotte, and we had no idea what the hell we were watching.
Right.
The movie wasn't great, but I was like, "Oh, it's the kid from Stranger Things," and "Oh, I love Anya Taylor-Joy."
Yes.
And yeah, and that was The New Mutants.
I was not very impressed with that movie, but she does play Magic, Ilyana Rasputin, she's one of my favorite X-Men. So more points to her, man. Thoroughbreds, you totally reminded me of this movie, and it got me super excited. I could actually tie it back to this movie. You'll see. But I want to point out with Thoroughbreds, really fucking good movie. Olivia Cook is the other girl in it.
Yes, I love Olivia Cook.
Right, Olivia Cook, who, you know, she's in a bunch of things right now. She's in House of the Dragon. But then there's another actor in that who plays the stepfather. His name's Paul Sparks. And he's always like a bit character in other movies. He's in Boardwalk Empire. You remember Boardwalk Empire? He's the guy that like has that weird laugh. He's like, that guy. He's amazing in like so many different things, but he's always like a side character. And I just really fucking love Thoroughbreds. But the way I can tie it all together is that Paul Sparks was a big part of House of Cards. And then there's another actor that was a big part of House of Cards, and he's in this movie too. The dad, the guy that plays Anya Taylor-Joy's dad, right? And yeah. And so with Anya Taylor-Joy, when we see her Casey flashbacks, there's like an equally creepy and disturbing thing going on in her past. There's this big theme in this movie of the idea of like a person is almost like that kind of that Japanese pottery. Like, you know, that I can't remember the term for it. Maybe you remember, Danny, but like in Japan, I know that like if a mug breaks or something like that, or a plate, they'll put it back together, but they'll put gold in the crack to like kind of glue it back together, so it becomes this like new thing. I can't remember what that term is, but I feel like that's kind of what Shyamalan was going with this, where it's like you kind of have to get broken in life to become something better, to like
Yeah,
ascend, you know?
that aspect of her character I really liked, and I like he he doesn't show that right away.
Right,
I
right,
that so that is something that I'll greatly compliment him on. That like the movie starts and they're at that girl's birthday party, and the girl's like, well, I couldn't invite 25 people and out of 26 people to the birthday party,
right,
so we invited the girl who always gets in trouble and never talks to anybody.
right.
And the fact that like we see through these flashbacks, which at first we're like, oh, uh she's going hunting with her, dad and with her uncle. And, oh, this looks like, oh, maybe it's just she's going to have survival skills.
Right.
And then we realize the much darker elements of that her uncle was, abusing her, or molesting her.
Yeah.
And that, that led to her being the way that she is in school. And then we get this great reveal at the end where like she's down to like basically her undershirt, and you see all the like self-inflicted scars and like cutting scars that she has. And I thought that that's something that very easily could have, you know, very tempting maybe for a director to like throw that out at the audience right at the beginning, but to kind of slowly show that along the way, um, I, I I I thought that was skillful in a way by Shyamalan.
Yeah. Yeah, he was actually using restraint, which is not really his strong suit,
Yeah,
right? um, Sebastian Arcelus, that's the actor's name that plays her dad. And it's interesting with her dad because there's these bonding moments. The way that they're framed, because of that restraint that you just mentioned, Danny, it seems like those scenes are to show why Casey has these survival skills, why she knows right away when Dennis goes to pull her friend out of the room, she says, pee on yourself. Like she's already acting wise, like she knows what to do. And so they frame it with these scenes where she's interacting with her dad and then her uncle. And you're like, okay, like she obviously learned survival skills and hunting and stuff from her dad. That's why she can survive this situation. But then it takes that turn pretty much in the final act of the movie where we have the scene where it's always her as a little girl and she's like hunting with her dad and her uncle. At one point, the uncle's like, barking or like making a noise like he's like a bear, and he's got his clothes off. He's down to his underwear in the middle of the woods. And it's a very disturbing scene to see, because you're looking at a little girl, a very pretty little girl, and you feel for her and you think she's very innocent. Then you see this giant burly man in his underwear in the wilderness, and it's disturbing. One thing I want to say about Shyamalan is that regardless of how silly his dialogue can be, there is a meanness in almost all of his movies. Like there's stuff in his movies that like the characters can be cruel, things that can happen to some of the main characters, innocent people, horrible things can happen to
and
innocent people. Go ahead.
and he has a theme always of bad stuff happening to children.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The Sixth Sense, the mom who was poisoning her daughter, the whole scene with oh god, the actress who in the tent who grew up to be on the OC.
Oh, there's the little girl in the tent. I'll look it up while you go ahead.
Yeah.
Keep making your point though.
You have obviously an Unbreakable. There's elements of child abuse, elements of the killer at the end, the janitor, has kidnapped a family and has kids tied up in the basement or in the bathroom. In Signs, the kids are in trouble, fighting from the aliens. Uh, in The Village, children are killed or die. The movie starts with like a funeral for a child.
Yeah.
So this is something that, I mean, The Visit, dear Lord, with the poor boy at the end.
Oh, yes.
So, like, the idea of, Shalaman, that is a theme that comes up in a lot of his movies, is that, the world is not a nice place, and that, even though children are mostly innocent, terrible stuff can and does happen to them.
Yes. Yeah. Really, really good point. I didn't even think about that, but damn, you're right on the money there. And I mean, the main character is a kid who had horrible things happening to him, right? And it made him eventually become a fucking supervillain. So we have this creature, the Beast, that is this extra personality that the Doctor wasn't aware of in this movie, and he has superpowers at this point. He's able to get shot by a fucking shotgun, and he's able to walk it off essentially. Was Misha Barton? Was that the actress you were looking
Yes,
for?
that's who it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. So anyway, I actually haven't seen Glass, but to me, the way that this movie works, it is a true supervillain origin story where, like, he's got these different personalities, but things become truly supernatural. And it's funny is that, like, the clues are there when you're watching this movie, because he goes on a fucking train to transform into the Beast. And you're like, wait a minute, Shyamalan train, like there might be something to this, right? And then I mean, we can kind of wrap this up. It's so funny. You and I were having this discussion last night. We're like, why don't we do like a 30-minute review? I don't have much to say about this movie. Meanwhile, we're like almost on a fucking hour now, right?
To be fair, we started talking about Split 20 minutes in, so we really have only been doing it for a half hour. But
there you go.
I will say that some of the imagery involving the Beast is fantastic. There's the one scene where you just see Anya Taylor-Joy's big eyes like staring up, horrified, and then the camera turns and there's, James McAvoy climbing the walls like an animal. There's the scene where he's climbing across like the trestle above the lights, knocking out the lights as he's coming down the hallway. It really does. And like even the way his body physically changes, like you see like the veins popping on him, like he just took like 2 needles full of like steroids and he's ready to go fight Hulk Hogan.
Right.
Like the friggin' veins pop out and he's like, he goes from like, I'm Hedwig, a little boy, to like,
yes. Yeah, I fucking love it. And there's such like foreshadowing and foreboding with this, because they show like a picture that someone had drawn of the Beast at one point, and it looks like this big furry monster. And they refer to the Beast at multiple points. They talk about how he's going to eat them and things like that. And he literally does eat a fucking girl at one point. That's another really creepy image of, like, you don't really see it. You just hear the chewing noises and you see the girl's like dead body. But that's really fucking disturbing too. So I mean, the Beast is built up throughout this whole movie, and then of course you have this amazing performance by McAvoy at the very end. And this is a image that they use a lot in like thumbnails and stuff for this movie. Is McAvoy's face up against the bars of Anya Taylor-Joy's cell, and he looks all crazed. And he once again, like, his illness has made him so strong. He was broken and he's made stronger. He's able to fucking bend the bars like, old school Superman. And what I like about this movie, and I forgot about this until I saw it again, is that it's not like Anya Taylor-Joy comes up with a clever way to escape and then she gets out. And it's not like she like shoots him a lot or cops show up and shoot him. It's that he sees that she was broken as well. And he's like, never mind. Like he goes after the other girls because nothing's ever happened to them. They've had a sheltered life. But then when he sees that she's been broken, he like backs off essentially and leaves her alone.
Yeah.
Great ending, yeah.
And then of course we get the stinger where it's like they're in a diner. Everybody's watching the news. They're like, this guy has multiple personalities. The beast is like all the animals in the zoo that combined into one like a horrible figure called the Horde.
Yeah.
And then this one woman, as they're panning up, is like, wow, that reminds me of like that crazy guy who blew up that train 15 years ago. What was his name? And then all of a sudden, boom, there's David Dunn. Oh, they called him Mr. Glass.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I remember like being in the movie theater for that and being like, oh, fuck.
So fucking
great
good.
Moment. Really good moment.
Unfortunately, I had that spoiled for me, so I knew that. Like, thanks, internet. It was spoiled before I saw it, but it still is a great fucking moment. Even watching the movie a second time, the way that it's set up, because they play the fucking Unbreakable music. You know, the music that... Yeah, go ahead.
But the other thing is like, so yeah, this movie came out in the middle of the MCU, but it was only the MCU at that point that were doing post-credit stuff. Nobody else was doing that. Nowadays, it's like you have to Google every movie you're in to see if there's some like post-credit stuff, which thanks a lot, Marvel. But so I remember a lot of people like got up and were like turned around, and then the movie came on. So you have a lot of people like, huh? And like either ran back to their seats or just stood where they were and watched that last stinger.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fucking good. They're playing that fucking Sixth Sense music. You got Bruce Willis, you know, God bless him, is still with us at that point, you know. And then he just leads to Glass, which we're not fucking covering on this show. We got one more Shyamalan movie in the barrel over here to go. We got Trap, which is coming out
in a couple weeks. August 2nd, I believe. Early August.
Yes. So that'll be our final Shyamalan movie. But Danny, if people were to subscribe to our channel, what other things could they enjoy?
Well, we did. We covered all of season 2 of Interview with the Vampire. All 8 episodes. We did a big like season 2 wrap up, finale review, look ahead to season 3. And then we've been doing the Shyamalan videos. We have a bunch of Shyamalan reviews, which we've mentioned. And then we have a few different shorts up on the channel, some indie movies, some other stuff. I'm going to be posting, by the time this is out, I will have posted a short review of Longlegs, which I just saw. And I'm very interested in seeing that again. To get it's a lot. So I think it requires a second viewing. But yeah, so you'll have that up. And then, we're going to start. We are coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And we are going to cover not all of the franchise, because it's really not that great of a franchise. But we are going to cover the first 4 films in the franchise and the 2 Platinum Dune remakes that came out in the early 2000s. So 6 Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies that we'll be reviewing for the 50th anniversary, which is coming up in August of this year.
Yeah.
And you want to hear a crazy thing? The Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, is doing a 50th anniversary screening of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That's fucking weird, man.
And
Jesus.
Tickets go on sale. I think it's August 1st to the general public. And I'm like super excited to try to get a ticket to that.
Wow.
But like, that's how important of a movie that is. The original film. It's a movie that has transcended just being a horror movie. And you know, it's playing at the fucking Museum of Modern Art this summer. So I thought if it's good enough for MoMA, we could cover the first bunch of Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies on our channel as well.
Yes, hell yeah. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 with what's his face? Viggo Mortensen. Yeah, that's gonna be playing at the Louvre next week too. Yeah. So
Nice.
anyway, we got to get going. We love you guys. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll be back with some more Shyamalan and then some Leatherface. See ya.